A mature society must learn to live with uncomfortable views. There should be no glorification of sitting in office every day till 1 o'clock. Bail application doesn't require 20 hearings. We treat liberty very casually in this country.
Right.
When you're young, I call it the arrogance of youth. You're the cat's whiskers and you'll go into a court and you'll just argue the way.
Right.
And suddenly you arrive there and you see a completely different world. What a waste of time.
Oh my God.
And that shattered all my confidence.
Greetings and welcome to Judicata, the NLIU Law Podcast. My name is Arun Jaitley and I shall be your host for today. Our guest today is someone who's seen the law from almost every vantage point. After pursuing his LLM from the University of Cambridge, he was designated as one of the youngest senior advocates at the Delhi High Court. His career has spanned the bar, the bench, as well as public service, having served as a standing counsel for the central government, a judge for the Delhi High Court, and later as the Additional Solicitor General of India. He regularly appears before the Supreme Court in some of India's most significant constitutional as well as commercial disputes. To name a few, the Sabrimala temple entry case, the Subhash Desai defection case arising out of the Maharashtra political crisis, and the case deciding the legality of the unilateral appointment of arbitrators. It's a pleasure today to welcome Senior Advocate Mr. Neeraj Kishan Kaul. How are you, sir?
Thank you for having me over. Lovely to meet all of you.
It's absolutely a pleasure, sir. Today, we want to know about your journey into law, how your experience has been, and also furthermore, with so many things happening in the field of law, such significant cases coming up, how you as an advocate have adapted through the times.
Well, when you start off, and when I did in the late 80s, it was a different world.
Right.
And I think post-liberalization, the way the Indian economy opened up, the areas of law which opened up was unthinkable when I joined the profession. In fact, I say possibly if you're litigating, today the most exciting place to litigate is this country. The sheer range of subjects that you deal with is mind-boggling. And a general practitioner, which I think in the beginning every youngster should go through the various areas of law rather than specializing, it's unimaginable, from gas pricing to airports to spectrum to cancer drugs to computer chips. You name it and there's litigation around that.
Absolutely.
Apart from the known areas of arbitration, insolvency, etc. So fascinating times to be in litigation.
So starting at the very beginning, sir, your family has been part of different administrative setups as well as a legal setup. For you, was law always a natural choice, or was there any deliberation of any other field that you wanted to get into?
My father was a lawyer, and so one would hear stories of courtroom battles, dramas. One had the fortune of meeting some of the greats and the giants of that time, and that naturally gets you interested. And don't forget, the late 60s, early 70s were also a period of some huge and important constitutional developments, property rights, tussle between privileges of assemblies and courts, Golaknath, Keshanand Bharti, and so on and so forth. And so, you were part of all that. These are discussions which would happen at home. You would hear them. And I think then you naturally get drawn towards it. And I was also fond of debating and public speaking. And, at that time, you have a very limited perspective and you feel law is all about just going and arguing. And then you later on realize there's much more to it. So I think what was that, because of what the environment at home, the people you met, one did get naturally drawn to.
So you pursued your BA/LLB honors from St. Stephen's College. And furthermore, you pursued your LLM from the University of Cambridge. Did you see any kind of difference in the way of teaching, in the way of approaching the law? And do you think that has shaped you in some kind of way?
I hate to say this because I have great respect for professors in India and Indian universities. But I think they encourage you to think a lot more and challenge yourself as well as the person teaching you abroad. Although the Campus Law Center did, and they were great professors, and I'll come to it later. The gentleman who taught me constitutional law was one of the greatest constitutional law experts that India has had, the late Professor P.K. Tripathi. And he was one of the people instrumental in introducing the case law system into the campus law. And campus law center at its time was the premier institute. And so there was movement in that direction, a lot more debate, a lot more, not than just a rote system, which I feel even now the Indian education system has to break those shackles. We have to be taught to think originally and think out of the box, which very often we don't do. And we've had brilliant professors, but I still feel the people drawn to academia abroad, there are far more very competent people drawn to academia abroad than they are in India for a set of reasons. So when you go to a university like Harvard or Cambridge, some of the people teaching you are legends, like Professor Lauterbach at my time and things. These are people the Dworkin, Amartya Sen debates. These are what legends are made of.
And even in your early years, you've participated in other curricular activities such as moot courts, AIMCC, and you've also won quite a few. So, sir, is there any parallels to, now that you're an advocate at the Supreme Court, do you see any parallels between such competitions and the Supreme Court? And furthermore, do you think law students should be pursuing such activities?
No, I think law students must pursue these activities because it teaches you how to prepare a case, how to present a case. It also, to some extent, rids you of the hesitation a lot of people may have of public speaking. Some are natural, some hone the skill as they go along, others are hesitant. Moots are a place where you can gradually develop the art of public speaking, rid yourself of that hesitancy. But having said that, big caution note, we all make that mistake. When we arrive on the in court, we think, we've mooted, we won competitions, and when you're young, I call it the arrogance of youth. You're the cat's whiskers, and you'll go into a court and you'll just argue the way. And suddenly you arrive there and you see a completely different world. And the way you're probed, the way judges ask you questions, there's someone opposing you who's very good, and things it's like playing golf on the course and playing in a practicing range.
Absolutely.
So when you go from the practicing range for the first time onto the course, it's a different world altogether.
Right. You've now done a plethora of cases across your practice areas. Is there a case or an incident from your previous years that has absolutely shaped the kind of lawyer that you're today? Because there are so many things that a textbook or a professor cannot really teach you. But once you start practicing, there are instances where you understand what the law really is.
It'll be unfair for me to point out one case, but definitely in your journey, there are fascinating cases of, say, patents, cancer drugs, there are cases of insolvency, arbitrations, constitutional law above all, which come up. And they definitely leave a mark on you. At a personal level, there are incidents which happen, which, for instance, liberty. Now, if you ensure someone's liberty, at a personal level, it's very satisfying. And now, as an incident you asked, I remember as a young senior, I was appearing before Justice Badr Ahmad, as he then was. And this was on the first floor of the Delhi High Court. And someone had been behind bars in Bombay in one of the preventive detention matters for over 1.5 to 2 years. And he'd repeatedly tried and had not been granted bail. And I have my views on it. According to me, we treat liberty very casually in this country, and we send people behind bars very easily. So that matter, after a 2.5 hour argument, we finally managed to get him the relief. So when I came out, his wife just held my hand, put her forehead on it and sobbed. On my side, on my shoulder, his sister put her forehead and just sobbed and just thanked. And I can tell you, it's these incidents which are more satisfying than any big dispute that you do, because at a human level, what you have been part of the journey of helping someone regain his liberty, for instance, is a very satisfying feeling.
So in one of your previous interviews as well, you stated that in our country, really, personal liberty is taken a bit more frivolously than it should be. Do you think that's still the case even today? And what are the courts doing now to get better at this aspect of the law?
With the ease that we send people behind bars in this country and arrest them at the drop of a hat, and very often in pure civil disputes, which are given a criminal color. And equally, I blame the state, and it's not about this government or that government.
Right.
In this country, successive governments have been, I'm sorry to say, rather casual when it comes to liberty of the individual, which is one of the paramount rights under the Constitution. And at a drop of a hat, a person is deprived and incarcerated. And then he spends months behind before a bail application is decided. A bail application doesn't require 20 hearings.
Absolutely.
A bail application, one way or the other, should be over in 2 to 3 hearings at the most. So I personally am deeply disturbed about people being sent behind bars, not now, for years in this country, at the drop of a hat. It's a practice which concerns me a lot.
Right. What would be one practical advice that you give now young lawyers entering the field with respect to handling cases like these and handling them with much more sensitivity because of the nature of the case itself?
I can tell you nothing new. I can only tell you what was passed on to me by my parents and my seniors. You've got to have a strong sense of justice, what is right, what is wrong. Dig in your heels, be there, be patient.
Right.
And don't take shortcuts. There will be days when you'll be without work. There'll be days, future will look uncertain. And especially, I have to say, I truly sympathize with first generation lawyers because they really are in this jungle with no one to guide them. Hundreds and thousands of lawyers all around, no one to guide them. Many come from outside the city to a city like Delhi and Bombay. Even rental accommodation, getting to office is a challenge for them. And in that whole world, with the uncertainties they live, but this is what I learned. I learned meticulous planning. I learned the ability to ultimately select the crucial facts which are necessary, because in a country like India, as you know, a judge has 50 to 70 matters. You don't expect him to have read every line, short of a judge like Justice Nariman, who was exceptional, who knew every line of every file. It's impossible for the most hardworking judge also. So do so. So dig in your heels, be patient, no shortcuts, and stay away from the pressure of a lot of people who would tell you of malpractices and shortcuts as the way out. That doesn't work in the long run. Your reputation counts. The way you go about things count. They may sound cliched, but these things really help you in the head if you've played straight and clean.
We've heard a lot of good things about the juniors that have worked with you. What do you do to maintain that relationship with them, and what is the kind of advice that you give them going forward in their field?
I'll tell you very honestly, I thank God that I have been blessed to have had exceptional youngsters who have worked with me since 1997-98 in my chamber. Exceptional human beings, outstanding lawyers, and I think part of my growth story, whatever it has been, a large part of the credit goes to them and the staff who was with me. Having said that, as with every relationship, you have to work on it. You work on a marriage also.
Absolutely.
You must work on your relationship. These are youngsters who come to you. Many don't come with a legal background. They don't know anyone. So you have to make them feel at home. You have to give them that feeling of security. You have to look after them financially. I'm not a believer when people say that youngsters don't need to be paid. I'm a strong believer that youngsters who come into your chamber need to be financially looked after. You have to give them that sense of belonging and maintain a long-term relationship. Help them wherever you can. Beyond that, it's their destiny. And mind you, let me caution you, I am a very hard taskmaster. So if you were to ask them, they would tell you nightmarish stories also. But I feel it's also my duty to correct and teach them. Because if I don't do it, how do I prepare them for the future? And that's my small way of giving it back to the...
Now I'd like to pivot the conversation to your return to the bar and your ASG years. You were also, before that, you were also appointed as the standing counsel for the central government by the likes of Mr. Jaitley. How was that? How was working with the likes of these people?
Mr. Jaitley was a remarkable individual. There was no reason for him to. I was all of 33, 34 when he picked me up as the standing counsel.
Right.
But for whatever reasons, he formed some opinion on me. And he just casually, I was sitting with him in court. I remember it was a matter before Justice Ramamurthy. And he happened to be there. So I just wished him, we sat down. And he just casually whispered into my ear and said, your name has been sent for standing counsel. So, I almost fell off the chair. I said, but I'm all of 33 or
Right.
34. So he said, what's your problem? Just name has been said, now go and do it. And just talk to Madan, being Justice Low Court,
Right.
who was then our ASG, also a remarkable
Right.
human being. And I had the privilege and pleasure of working with him, and I knew him well. And so it was excellent to work or know people like Mr. Jaitley, who was there. Mr. Sorabji was then the Attorney
Right.
General. Mr. Salve was the Solicitor General. And I worked very closely with both of them
Right.
in some very important matters. And absolute pleasure and a great learning experience. You can't ask for more in life.
Right.
If you're exposed to these people, their style of preparation, to know them, to interact with them at a personal level, it's a great opportunity at the age of 33 and 34.
Absolutely. You were then an ASG from the years 2014 to 2017. Now, was there any difference with the kind of lawyer you were while representing the union and the kind of lawyer you were while you were an independent counsel? Is there a difference, or is it the same?
Look, your basic lawyering skills can't change.
Right.
Your style of presentation can't change. But of course, the perspective
Right.
is completely different to a great extent, because on the private side, you have the best of law firms coming to you.
Right.
You have all the big companies, celebrities, all those kind of matters that you do. The preparation is at a different level. Unfortunately, on the government side, the assistance other than your own chamber is not much.
Right.
And dealing with the Indian bureaucracy is a different ball game. Of course, there are some outstanding bureaucrats. I've had some great experiences with some exceptional bureaucrats, but it is a challenge.
Absolutely.
Very often, the Indian bureaucracy, instead of being a facilitator, has been very obstructionist also. So getting through to them, discussing, convincing them what's the right, fair approach is a challenge. That's outside court.
Right.
In court, yes, the government at times has a good case, has a very stateable case. But at times, let's face it, some of the actions of the government also are difficult to defend.
True.
But having said that, that can equally happen
on the other side,
in private litigation also.
Absolutely.
But I think the bigger challenge was dealing with the bureaucracy, the systems, how they work.
You were a judge. You had the opportunity of deciding cases as well. And after you had turned into and returned to the bar again, was there a different perspective you looked at it? Was there more sympathy with respect to arguing cases, having seen both sides of the courtroom?
See, I had a very short stint of 4 months.
Right.
So I can't say that I stayed long enough to really understand, but understanding in respect for the judiciary, irrespective of you, whether you become a judge or not, is there, because as a lawyer, you see how overloaded the Indian judiciary is. And you now have the system of law clerks. In those days, they just started. There were hardly any law clerks, etc. So you expect a judge to do 40, 50 matters a day without any proper assistance. Of course, it's much better now. And the load is enormous. So, and that's why I say, when you said advice to lawyers, one of the first things that a lawyer must learn and hone is the clarity of thinking and the clarity of presentation.
Right.
Because a judge with 70 matters can't listen to you indefinitely.
Absolutely.
And you must have that ability to present your case clearly. But of course, enormous respect, there are a large number of extremely hardworking judges in this country across the courts who work under enormous pressure and are doing a splendid job.
Also, on the note of the fact that there were a lot of law firms in private practice that do come to you, and that's another landscape of the legal field. For younger lawyers like us in law schools, there's a constant battle and a race for tier 1 law firms. There's a race that keeps going on. So do you see a distinction, and what would you tell lawyers with respect to choosing litigation or corporate law? Is there any balance that needs to be struck here?
Look, whether it's corporate law or litigation is a personal choice.
Right.
I'm a hardcore litigator.
Absolutely.
So I'll never tell anyone to do corporate law. They'll slaughter me for this, the corporate law guys. But all that I've known is litigation. To me, that's where the challenge in the court lies.
Right.
But tier one firms are, of course, very good. But I don't think one should restrict to them. Very often you may get lost in a big firm.
Right.
At times, it may be better, or at least part of the various internships you do, apart from tier one law firms, you must go to good chambers of individuals, or where there's good litigation, good presence in courts, boutique law firms, which are smaller, where you get the attention of the partner and the seniors, is important. Because one thing I've been now noticing with a lot of law firms is that they don't come to court as often as they used to in my formative initial years. Now, for me, a youngster who wants to litigate and comes to court once in 2 weeks, I don't think is great training in their initial years. And especially during your internship period, you must explore some individual chambers as well. Unfortunately, there is a huge dearth in this country of good individual chambers and good firms as well to go to learn.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, the supply and demand is hugely lopsided.
Yeah.
I think we have law degrees even now being distributed without the kind of quality checks which are required. So you're producing a lot more lawyers than the system requires. And there is neither that kind of demand nor that kind of absorbing capacity in the system. So naturally, then you land up in all kinds of places, and even to get into a good chamber, there's a huge rush, and it's not easy to get in there.
True. And sir, do you think that getting an LLM degree has some kind of role to play in all of this, like with respect to recruitments, with respect to working in chambers, arguing in court? Does it give any kind of edge?
To be honest, to me, an LLM from a university like, say, Cambridge, Oxford, Harvard, or anywhere you go, you choose to go, is about personally enriching yourself. It's an experience of life. You meet some of the most brilliant people in academia. You have the fortune of listening to them, being taught by them. You meet people from across the world, which gives you a certain perspective of what's happening. You travel the world. And this is what makes life so interesting and enriching. I don't think it really helps you in court, in your performance. I think those are a different set of skill set, but that's not the way to look at it. In life, everything is not about whether it helps you in law or not. It's an enriching experience, which if you can get a good university, not just for the heck of it going to any university, but if you get a good university, one should avail of it. Absolutely. But to say that it translates into practicing law, in fact, on a lighter note, I'll tell you, I remember when I just come back from Cambridge and I was walking into the Delhi High Court, must be my first or second day. So, everyone who comes back in the beginning, you think you've just graduated from a great university and you have all kinds of misconceptions about yourself. And I was just introduced, without naming the gentleman, a former president of the High Court Bar. And so he introduced me and he said he's just come back from Cambridge. And the first thing the gentleman turns around and says is, "What a waste of time."
Oh my God.
And that shattered all my confidence. But having said that, I think these are great experiences of life.
It's more about personal enrichment.
Absolutely.
Is there any way the court detaches itself from all of what's going outside the courtroom, or does it permeate?
I think court is expected to detach itself. If court starts ruling according to public sentiments, irrespective of the law on the point or what they feel the interpretation of the law is, it would be a sad day. And that maturity is expected and is shown by a large number of judges, that they decide purely on law in a professional manner. Public sentiments can't guide how a matter is to be decided.
And so one more thing that we want to get your opinion on actually is that a lot of youngsters today watch comedy shows and several other such platforms where there have been a lot of controversies. And one of the arguments that we heard from your side was that danger to public order has a very high threshold, and even morality for that matter should not be based on a hypersensitive person. So, do you think that these platforms, maybe even news media channels, getting affected by different administrative channels, is that fair, or is there some nuance that we might be missing today?
I am a strong believer that interference of the state with platforms where views are expressed, even if certain unsavory views are expressed, even if views at times are in bad taste are expressed, should be allowed. Free speech must prevail. Of course, there are cases which you could talk about, which the law and the constitution talk about, integrity, sovereignty of India.
Right.
Those are a separate set of cases. But you can't conveniently put everything which is uncomfortable to you under the category of public order, sovereignty, and integrity. You can't do that.
Right.
And a mature society must learn to live with uncomfortable views.
True.
As I said, unsavory views also. And that is the maturity of a nation and a society. You can't be that fragile that you can't accept or tolerate views.
And so you were also part of the Aadhaar case. Something that I wanted to ask is that at that time, we were balancing both national progress with individual privacy. Another Aadhaar has been part of our daily lives for so many years now. Do you think we've struck the balance?
By and large, yes. I think, fundamental duties, fundamental rights have been given their due place and importance in the Constitution. And easily they can be harmonized.
Right.
There may be not tension here or there, but easily they can be harmonized.
Right.
There's no doubt about it. But I do feel that courts and society must constantly revisit the importance of fundamental rights as provided under the Constitution.
Right.
And the state has to be reminded about it from time to time, because there is an inherent tendency in the state, irrespective of the government in power, to trample upon the rights of the individual.
Now, moving to the commercial side of your cases, you've been part of cases like the SR Steel case, furthermore, even the NSE co-location matter. And all of these matters have such technical jargon in them. And always, not every lawyer is abreast with every single subject matter in the world. So how do you get yourself acquainted with the subject matter that's coming here and the technical jargon that comes with this?
You definitely need to be educated in detailed conferences, because very often in these matters, the people who come to brief you are very well versed in that subject. These are specialized areas, some of them. So people who come for co-location matters explain to you the whole concept of co-location. I remember when it happened, I wanted to understand what is co-location. How does it work? How are those servers installed at the stock exchanges? When interesting patent matters come, for instance, cancer drugs come. Standard essential patents come up. Matters of geographical indicators come up. These are matters where you need to hear specialized lawyers who know about international practices, who know about the subject, and copious amounts of notes are made and time is spent to understand this. Similarly, there could be commercial disputes, financial aspects, where you would need a separate set of people to educate you. So I have to say, as I was mentioning earlier, that I've been fortunate to have some exceptional people work with me, and they would sit with me, help understand the matter, make their own notes, and then we would all, with our collective effort, we would probably understand the subject better. But yes, you're right. In the beginning, when the matter comes, I can't expect that I know about a cancer drug or a co-location, because those are things I don't know about. And that's why I said that we are very fortunate post-liberalization, living in times where you're seeing the kind of litigation, the areas and variety which I could not have even imagined when I joined the profession, that one day in this country, there will be such wide variety of litigation.
Throughout your journey, as I said, and you were the standing counsel, a judge, the ASG, throughout the years, have you seen any change with respect to the relationship between the bar and the bench? How has it been evolving now?
It's just that when we joined, it was a relatively much smaller place. The world was very small. The number of lawyers, the number of judges. So, there was a certain every judge knew who was practicing. He had a sense of, or he or she had a sense of who was there. You had a certain familiarity in the right way, that you knew people you were appearing before. I think it's just exploded in such a big way now that when I go to the court, there's barely any space to walk. You can, at times, you can't enter a courtroom. By the time you enter it, you're almost worried you may miss a matter. And there are forums which have opened.
Yeah.
So many people are practicing in different forums. For instance, there are people who only practice in NCLT and NCLAT.
Right.
Now they hardly come to the High Court at all. In our times, there were just a handful of 2-3 forums, and it was the High Court and the Supreme Court. So I thought there was a lot more familiarity in the right sense.
Right.
Today, it's such a big world. Judges are a lot more. Lawyers are numbers which are unimaginable.
Right.
So I think it's a lot more impersonal world,
Right.
where that degree of familiarity is completely gone now.
Does being personal with the bar and the bench a very important aspect of it?
That's why I said familiarity in the right sense.
Okay.
I don't
Understood.
mean personal, meaning that you and the judge should have
Absolutely.
dinner or be cozy with each other.
Absolutely.
But you know about the bar.
Absolutely.
And the bar knows the bench that they're appearing before. Today, with these 4 hours and numbers, I think there's a lot more distance. My familiarity doesn't mean familiarity
Absolutely,
of
sir.
coziness
Absolutely.
between the bar and the bench.
And so with different kinds of practices also coming up, such as arbitration, and you've also been part of the unilateral appointment of arbitrators case, how do you see this aspect of dispute resolution going forward? Do you think it's growing now? Because even now, when we as interns go to courts, we see that a lot of arbitration matters do end up in the court. And it does defeat the purpose of the efficiency that it brings to the table.
Absolutely.
What do you think our nation should be doing to address this?
I think our Arbitration Act, when it came out in the 90s, was one of the most modern legislations on the subject, and had all the provisions of UNCITRAL, the New York Convention, etc., all incorporated.
Right.
I don't think as a nation we have made enough attempts, far from enough attempts, to developing India as a hub for arbitration. Look at Singapore. Look where they've reached.
Right.
Your own arbitrations are being held there.
Right.
What a pity. Should they not be held in this country? And you have extremely bright lawyers and judges here. Why should it not be done in this country?
Right.
And I don't think we've had either the institutional development. I would also, we haven't even developed an arbitration bar. The same set of lawyers do court work, and then they rush for an arbitration.
Right.
The preparation can never be the same as a lawyer who's dedicated to arbitration does. Courts also, I think, have to take part of the blame. I've seen a lot more interference in India, although everyone says we will not interfere under 34 or 37, but then courts end up interfering where they ought not to have interfered.
Absolutely.
And to my mind, that part of the blame also lies with them. It's far more interfering than it ought to have been or should have been. I think part of the blame also lies with our arbitrators. I think a lot of stories that I hear, the arbitrators in this country also, again, as I said, there are exceptional judges, retired judges who are arbitrators, absolutely exceptional, but they're just not them.
Right.
There are others as well.
Right.
So part of the blame lies with the arbitrators as well. And of course, you have to have a more professional, dedicated arbitration bar in this country. And at an institutional level, you must develop and encourage and attract matters to come into India.
So now I want to ask you about something more recent, something going on in the courts. Live streaming of court proceedings had started. And even the smallest of things, such as the CJI's remarks over something which was very contextual for that matter, turning into viral clips on Instagram. Now, do you think this has changed are lawyers and judges now more media trained with respect to this, or does that not affect the courtrooms at all?
Live streaming or public access is good. I think, as they say, sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Right.
Transparency is good. Let the world watch. Let the people watch how courts perform. Having said that, yes, it does come with some problems. Part of it is the lawyers. I said a mature, good, professional lawyer would do his work and go home irrespective of whether he's being live streamed or not.
Hmm.
But there are people who say things with an audience at the back, not the
Right.
judges in front.
Right.
I think the judges, in some ways, have a problem because, as you rightly said, in the course of a argument, there are many questions you put.
Right.
There are many things you say which are
Right.
contextual. Now, if someone just picks them out of context and that goes viral, and you know how selective
Right.
these videos are.
Right.
No one knows the context. They pick up a word here, a sentence there. So yes, it does make it difficult for them as well.
Right.
But having said that, I think the way forward, you can't say we will not go
Right.
ahead with live
Right.
streaming. That has to continue, or at least, and people, the facility for people to watch proceedings
Right.
has to be there.
Right, sir.
It's good for the system.
If you could now go back and speak to your 25-year-old self, would there be anything that you would advise him, and would there be anything that you'd change about your journey today?
I would change nothing about my own journey. And again, going back to what I told you some time back, some people shape your life and how you conduct yourself. My father taught me the virtues of humility and a strong sense of what is right and what is wrong. My professor, Dr. P.K. Tripathi, gave me the love for constitutional law and how life should be conducted with and led with integrity. My late senior, Justice Arun Kumar, who retired as a judge of the Supreme Court, taught me that you have to be patient, have confidence in yourself, dig in your heels, prepare meticulously, learn to sift through a file, come up with the right set of facts, but there is no shortcut. These are the principles taught to me by some people who had an enormous influence
Right.
in my life. And those are the only lessons I can repeat and pass on to the next generation.
Absolutely.
And I said, they sound cliched, but believe you me, I know no other way. You have to
Absolutely.
follow this, and that's the only way.
Right, sir.
And one more thing.
Yeah.
This whole desire to go independent in 2 years and 3 years is absolutely wrong. You must work in chambers where you learn. Even when you go independent, try and be associated with someone where the day you have no work, go and work with them. There's nothing demeaning about it.
Right.
And there's nothing great about saying that I'm independent after 3 years and sitting and twiddling your thumbs in your office with no work at all.
Absolutely.
So please be in court every day. Please, the worst thing a youngster can do through his 20s and 30s is to sit empty-handed without work.
Right.
So if you don't have your own work when you go independent, build relationships with people where you can be involved with people in their work.
Right.
And go to court as far as possible every day.
And as you said, that law is a long grind. It requires a lot of effort, and it's a very tough field, to be very honest. And is there any book, film, hobby that keeps you sane for the rest of the week, going into the court now that you're going to join the Supreme Court soon?
I love traveling.
Right.
So this profession gives me the opportunity
Right.
to travel a lot. And I'm a passionate traveler. I travel a lot. Like music. I listen to music. I like cooking. I occasionally cook.
Right.
And of course, reading is something also I enjoy.
If I may ask, what is senior advocate Mr. Neeraj Kishan Kaul's favorite destination to travel?
Again, one would be unfair. Ladakh has been fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. I just did the north of Norway, which was spectacular. So there's so many places in the world to see. Egypt and Israel were fascinating. The whole that whole belt of Nazareth, the Sea of the Dead Sea, Sea of Galilee, Golan Heights, Jerusalem, the ride down the Nile. All fascinating trips.
Let's imagine a hypothetical situation where law wasn't the way to go. What do you think you would have done? What would your way have been?
I was very fond of theatre. Did a lot of theatre in school and college. Maybe that. I love travel, so a travel documentarian.
Absolutely.
Coupled with food. And Anthony Bourdain, I could pursue what he did. I loved what he used to do.
Absolutely.
Like that. But To every young lawyer, I'd say, again, I hear this very often, that there's no work-life balance, there's only work. I do not believe in it. I think you must have a work-life balance. It's a long journey. You must enjoy the profession. You must have interests other than the profession. The greats that I interacted with in my growing up years, like Mr. Sorabji, Mr. Nariman, all had interest in history, literature, travel, music. They had other interests.
Right.
They were not just preparing the whole day.
Right.
You can do a lot of work, do it very well, and yet have hobbies, and you must have hobbies.
Right.
And that also helps you develop as a good lawyer.
Right.
And take time off, which is very essential. There should be no glorification of sitting in office every day till 1 o'clock.
Right.
And secondly, of course, we've all done all-nighters, and there are days it's a rigorous profession. It requires a lot of discipline and hard work. But there is time, and there should be time to pursue hobbies and have a work-life balance. I'm
Absolutely.
very clear about it.
Absolutely, sir. Now, on a closing note, the only thing I'd like to ask you is, you've had such conversations before as well. You've been on different forums. Is there some question that you wish people asked you, but nobody ever actually does?
As I just mentioned, no one asks me about cooking, food, travel, theatre, music. No one. Everyone talks about law, and law.
Right, sir. And if I may ask you, what is your favorite dish, and what do you like to cook normally? What is your signature dish?
Look, I like the Kashmiri Pandit cuisine, which is the community I come from. It's a very evolved cuisine. And it's a cuisine which, unfortunately, there are hardly any restaurant also which serves that food. So there are a few books. I like reading those books on the ingredients which go into it. I like cooking, so I observe a lot of it being done at home. Other than that, I'm fond of Italian. I occasionally toss up a pasta.
Absolutely.
During the COVID, I one day attempted and made bedvi aloo from Varanasi.
Yeah.
So, one keeps doing it, but these are far and few.
Right.
One doesn't get to do it too often. But yes, if I'd get a chance, I'd travel and cook as much as I could.
Let's see, sir. Hopefully, with your lawyering days, you also open up a restaurant of your own.
You never know. If things go down south, you might see me at a restaurant.
That's perfect. We'll come. We'll come there as well. But honestly, sir, this has been a great conversation. We've learned a lot, and hopefully, we end up at the restaurant one day.
Absolutely, I'll serve you Kashmiri food.
Absolutely, sir.
Lovely talking to you. It's been a great pleasure, and thank you for inviting.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much.